Today, an axe is just a tool. But thousands of years ago it was a revolution, and behind it was one man who dared to try, dared to fail, and bled to invent something no one had ever imagined. This is the story of Karuk, a prehistoric man, with no power, no magic, only bare hands and a relentless will. When the storm came and children shivered while the elders gasped for breath, Karuk didn't pray to the gods. He picked up a stone and struck the trunk of a tree. The tree didn't fall easily. Blood dripped from his hands long before the first tree gave in. But Karuk kept going. He knew every minute lost could cost a life. In a journey filled with pain, trial, and ridicule, Karuk battled not just the forest, but his own doubts. And yet from this struggle came a discovery that would shake the very course of human evolution. It wasn't divine intervention. It was observation. It was grit. It was survival. And from what others saw as useless rocks, Karuk began to shape a weapon that would one day change everything. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another inspiring story like this. Now let's begin. The rain came without warning. Not a soft drizzle, but a roaring flood from the heavens that slammed into the earth like a war drum. The sky cracked open with thunder, and lightning danced like white fire across the night. Karuk stood at the mouth of the cave, his bare feet gripping cold, wet stone. Behind him, the tribe huddled together in silence, children curled in their mothers' arms, elders coughing, their breath shallow and weak. The firewood was soaked, and the flames had died hours ago. Every heartbeat echoed like a countdown. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. The cave no longer kept them warm, it only trapped their fear, but Karuk did not sit. He did not weep or tremble. He stared into the storm, then beyond it, toward the towering trees that swayed under the weight of the sky. One tree in particular, its canopy wide like the wings of a god, stood out. He thought, if I can bring it down, we can build. We can survive. He didn't have tools, just a stone, blunt, heavy, worn from use. But he gripped it anyway, muscles tense, jaw locked. Behind him, an old man muttered, "You'll die out there, Karuk." Karuk didn't answer. He stepped into the storm. Rain hit like fists. The mud pulled at his legs with every step, as if the earth itself was trying to drag him back. But he pushed forward, one breath at a time, until he stood before the tree. It was massive, ancient. The bark was as thick as his arm, gnarled and blackened from time. A beast in its own right. Karuk raised the stone above his head and slammed it against the trunk. Thud, nothing, again, thud. The tree didn't flinch, his hands slipped. Rain ran down his arms, mixing with the sweat and blood forming on his palms. Still he struck, over and over. His shoulders screamed, blisters split open, the stone chipped, but he didn't stop. He wasn't just fighting a tree, he was fighting the gods for the right to survive. Memories flooded his mind, his brother dying last winter from the cold, the baby born still, the silence that came after. He growled with every blow now, teeth clenched, chest heaving. His body ached, but his soul burned brighter. I won't let them die this time. Time disappeared. The night dragged on. The cave behind him was quiet. No one dared call him back. Somewhere, between exhaustion and desperation, Karuk felt something shift. A faint crack in the bark, a vibration in the core. He paused, breath ragged. Had it moved? Was it weakness or his own madness? He laughed, loud and broken and wild. The kind of laugh a man makes when all logic is gone but hope refuses to die. Baka. In the cave, a child whispered, "He's still out there!" The mother held her closer, whispering, "He always comes back." But not even she believed it. Not really. The night gave way to a ghostly dawn. Karuk was still standing, soaked to the bone, arms trembling. The tree stood too, unmoved, undefeated. But Karuk looked at the wound he had carved, a dent in a god's skin. It was not enough, but it was something. He turned back to the cave, bleeding, limping, soaked with rain and resolve. He didn't win that night, but he proved something that no one in the tribe could deny. Karuk would not stop, not for rain, not for pain, not even for death. The next morning, the storm had passed, but its chill remained, seeping into bone and breath alike. Smoke curled weakly from the half-dead fire in the cave. No one spoke of Karuk's midnight battle, but they glanced at him in silence. He was still limping. His shoulders slumped. His hands, now wrapped in moss and hide, trembled faintly as he chewed dried roots. Blood had dried on his jaw. His eyes were alive. Karuk rose and walked back into the forest. The tree still stood. It mocked him. The dent he had made in its bark was no bigger than a handprint, a reminder of how insignificant he was. But Karuk didn't. Curse it! He respected it. He whispered, "You've stood for generations, but I only need one moment." Then he lifted the same rock and struck again, and again, and again. The forest didn't answer. The birds flew away. The insects scattered. Karuk remained. By midday, his breath was ragged. The skin of his palms had torn open again. He wrapped them tighter. The rock had grown dull, the edge crumbling. The tree, however, now bore a wound. Thin, long, raw. A wound that would not kill it today, but promised that it could. A teenage boy named Nock, barely old enough to hunt, had followed. Karuk out of curiosity. He stood behind a bush, watching the older man break himself against the tree. He had never seen anything like it. Not just the stubbornness, but the faith. "Why do you keep doing this?" Nock finally called out, unable to hold his question. Karuk didn't turn around, but he answered, "Because waiting will kill us all." By evening, Karuk collapsed, not from injury, but exhaustion. His body hit the dirt like a falling rock. Nock rushed forward, panicked. Karuk's lips were cracked, his words barely a whisper. "I saw it move." "You saw the tree move?" "Not the tree," Karuk rasped, a faint grin flickering. "The future." Nock didn't understand, but he remembered that sentence for the rest of his life. That night, Karuk didn't eat. He lay curled in the far corner of the cave, body wrapped in dried skins, his breathing shallow but steady. A few others in the tribe whispered that he had gone mad. "Touched by lightning," one muttered, but Nock disagreed. "He's not crazy," the boy said. "He's just the only one who believes the tree can fall." The days passed. Karuk returned to the tree each morning, sometimes alone, sometimes followed quietly by Nock or another curious soul. Every strike left a mark. Every mark grew the wound. Each swing hurt more. Each breath came harder. But he learned. He started changing. The angle of the blow, letting the stone slide instead of crash. He used his body weight, not just his arms. He tested different rocks. Some broke too quickly. Some were too light. But one, a dark grey, sharp-edged, veined with tiny white crystals, seemed to bite deeper with every strike. He called it Bite Stone, and kept it close. On the 7th day, as dusk fell and fireflies blinked between leaves, Karuk raised Bite Stone above his head once more, and brought it down with everything left in him. Crack. The sound was different, not a thud, not a dull. Nock, a split. He froze. Nock gasped. The wound on the tree split wider, and for a brief moment, it shivered, then silence. Karuk stepped back. His chest rose and fell like thunder. His arms shook. He looked at the scar he'd carved into the tree and whispered, "You will fall." He wasn't smiling. But tears rolled silently down his cheeks, not because he had won, but because, for the first time, he knew he could. The forest was still that morning. No wind, no birdsong, not even the usual chirping of insects. It was as if the world itself had paused to watch. Karuk stood at the base of the tree once more, hands raw, arms trembling from days of relentless striking. Beside him, Nock held a fresh strip of hide, wrapping it tightly around Karuk's palms. "You don't have to do it today," the boy said quietly. Karuk met his eyes. "That tree doesn't care what day it is, but I do." With a deep breath, he raised Bite Stone. Every swing felt like dragging a mountain. His muscles burned with each strike. His ribs ached. He could barely hold his breath long enough to lift the stone above his head, yet he did, again and again. Each blow echoed louder than the last, not just sound, but something more, deeper, as if the tree was beginning to respond, not in rage, but in surrender. By midday, other members of the tribe had gathered quietly. They didn't speak, they didn't cheer, they simply watched. Some crossed their arms in doubt. Others folded their hands as if in prayer. One elder muttered under his breath, "Madness has a rhythm, and that man has danced to it for days." But then it happened. A groan rippled through the wood, low, drawn out, deep as the earth itself, the yoff. Tree tilted, only slightly at first. Karuk staggered back, unsure if it was real or if exhaustion was playing tricks. But Nock shouted, "It's moving!" A great creak roared through the air as roots tore from the soil like snapping bones. The ground trembled. Leaves fluttered down like falling feathers. Then, boom! The tree crashed to the forest floor, throwing dust, bark, and silence into the air. For a moment, no one breathed. Karuk fell to his knees. Not from weakness, but awe. The tree was down. Not by wind, not by fire, not by time, but by a man. Nock rushed to his side, eyes wide, voice shaking with excitement. "You did it! You really did it!" Karuk didn't answer at first. He just placed a hand on the broken bark and whispered something no one could hear. Then he turned to the others. Some looked amazed, some confused. One man asked, "How long did that take you?" Karuk replied without anger, "Longer than it should have, but not longer than it had to." That night, a fire was lit, higher and hotter than it had been in weeks. Meat was roasted, and children danced in front of the fallen tree like it was a sacred thing. Elders came forward, hesitant at first. One touched the wound Karuk had carved, and muttered, "Not even the mammoth brought down trees like this." Karuk sat apart from the celebration. Nock found him sitting on a stone, staring at the stars with swollen hands and tired eyes. "Why aren't you with them?" The boy asked. Karuk answered softly, "Because the tree falling, that was only the beginning." Nock didn't understand yet, but he would. Karuk rose again before dawn. With a smaller stone, he began chipping at the fallen tree's base, not to break it, but to shape it. He tapped gently, observed, tapped again. He wasn't just trying to, but he was trying to understand. The fallen tree stretched across the forest floor like a sleeping giant, its roots upturned, its crown tangled in the sky. It should have been a symbol of finality, of victory. But to Karuk, it was a beginning. For the first time in many seasons, the tribe had warmth and shelter. The thick trunk was carved into sections, rolled back toward the cave. A lean-to was built. Smoke curled from new fires. Laughter returned cautiously, like a bird unsure if it was safe to sing again. But Karuk didn't laugh. He spent his days beside the tree's stump, studying, not just wood, but stone. He had noticed something strange. As the days passed and his hands healed, he began testing the rocks he had used. Some had chipped with dull, slow cuts, others had broken too quickly. But a few, a rare few, had made deep, clean grooves in the bark. He held one of them now, a shard of dark grey stone cracked from the original bitestone. Its edge was jagged, but not weak. Sharp, almost like a tooth. Karuk turned it in his hand, eyebrows furrowed. Why did this cut deeper? Why did this last longer? Nock sat nearby, stacking bark for kindling. He looked up and asked, "Is it true that stone is just stone? Or are some better?" Karuk paused, then answered, almost to himself, "Not all teeth are equal. Why should stone be?" He picked up a second shard, smoother, rounder, useless against wood, then another, light, brittle, crumbly. He tested them one by one, scraping them along a leftover log. Only the jagged shard made a sound that echoed. A hiss. A bite. By dusk, Karuk had created a small circle of test stones, lined up like a silent jury. He squatted in front of them and began a ritual of his own, dragging them across bark, smashing them against rock, grinding them on flat stones, not to break, but to shape. Days passed. The tribe whispered again. He's at it with the stones again. Maybe he wants to bring the mountain down now. But some were curious. An elder named Harma came to watch. A quiet man, missing 3 fingers from a boar hunt long ago, he sat beside Karuk and watched him work in silence. Finally, Harma asked, "What are you making?" Karuk didn't look up. "I don't know yet." Harma nodded. "That's the right answer." The breakthrough came by accident. One morning, Karuk was grinding a piece of stone against another. He slipped, and the shard flew from his hands, slicing his forearm with a sharp sting. Blood welled up. He hissed in pain, gripping the cut, but then he stared at the shard. The edge was thin, almost like bone, not crumbling, not breaking, just sharp. He leaned forward, took a fallen branch, and dragged the shard across it. It cut. Not like a rock, but like something else. Something new. Karuk sat in silence for a long time, staring at the edge. Then, slowly, a grin spread across his weathered. Not because it was finished, but because for the first time in his life, he wasn't just using stone, he was shaping it. That night, he didn't sleep. He stayed by the fire, carving stone after stone, testing angles, pressure, patterns. His fingers blistered again, but this time, he welcomed it. Because now he wasn't just fighting the world with brute strength. He was learning how to fight, smarter. The morning sun broke through the trees like firelight spilling through cracks in the sky. Birds called out again. The forest was waking, but Karuk had not slept. He sat near the edge of the clearing, crouched beside his fire, his hands blackened with soot and dust. Before him lay something new, primitive but undeniable. A sharpened stone tool lashed tightly to a sturdy wooden handle. It didn't look like much, but it felt like a weapon, or maybe a question. He turned it in his hands. The edge, honed by hours of grinding, caught the sun like it remembered what it was like to be part of a mountain. He glanced at the fallen tree. Not all of it had been used yet, perfect for testing. Karuk walked over, heartbeat heavy. This wasn't just about cutting wood anymore. This was about testing what kind of man he had become. Nox saw him from afar and ran to catch up. "You made it," the boy said, awe coloring his voice. Karuk didn't look away from the tool. "I shaped it," he said slowly. "Now I need to know if it can shape the world back." He raised the tool, took a breath, and struck. Crack! The sound was sharp, clean. The bark split like it had been waiting. Not like before. No dull echo, no endless pounding. This was something different. Karuk paused, then struck again, and again. With each swing, the blade cut deeper. The work was faster, easier, smarter. He stopped after a dozen hits, sweat already, trickling down his face. But his eyes were wide, stunned. It works. The words weren't a shout, they were a whisper, a reverence. That afternoon, others gathered. Harma, 2 hunters, a mother with her child on her hip. They stood in silence, watching Karuk carve into a log in a fraction of the time it used to take. Some crossed their arms, some leaned in. No one laughed anymore. But then, it happened. On a particularly forceful swing, Karuk misjudged the angle. The tool bit too deep, caught in the grain. As he yanked it free, the edge sliced across his own forearm. The pain was white-hot. He gasped, dropping the tool. Blood flowed freely. Nox screamed, rushing toward him. "You're hurt!" Karuk sank to his knees, clutching his arm. Harma tore a strip of cloth from his tunic and pressed it against the wound. For a moment, all the old doubts returned. Maybe it was too dangerous. Maybe the tool was too wild. Maybe. But then Karuk looked down and saw something. Even bloodied, the tool had held its edge. It hadn't failed. He had, as Harma tied the cloth tighter, he murmured, "Even the sharpest tooth bites its own mouth." Karuk nodded, gritting his teeth. "Then we must teach the mouth how to chew." The crowd fell silent. A few looked uneasy. One hunter muttered, "What if that tool ends up in the wrong hands?" Karuk didn't flinch. Everything good can be twisted, fire, words, even stone. But that doesn't mean we should fear it. It means we must understand it. Later that night, the pain pulsed through his arm like a drumbeat. But Karuk didn't stop working. One-handed, he carved another blade, this time smaller, sleeker. He adjusted the handle, made the lashings tighter. He began to refine. He had felt power now, but also cost, and that made him wiser. Nock watched him work by firelight. "Doesn't it scare you?" the boy asked. Karuk didn't look up. "It should. That's how I know it matters." The morning after Karuk bled for his creation, the world seemed quieter. The forest still whispered, but the whispers now carried a new weight, of something ancient and new and not yet understood. Karuk sat near the fire with his arm bound tightly in leather strips. The gash still burned, but not as fiercely, as the questions that now stirred in the eyes of those around him. His tool, the sharpened stone, rested beside him on a bed of dry grass, gleaming in the firelight like it was alive. The first to approach was Harma. He didn't speak right away. Just looked at the blade, then at Karuk. "Some in the tribe are saying you brought something dangerous here," he finally said. Karuk looked up slowly. "It is dangerous," he answered. "But so is the cold, so is hunger, so is silence." Harma nodded, choosing his next words carefully. "But you know how to hold it. Others might not." Later that day, a young man named Bato, strong, loud, and always itching to prove himself, came to Karuk while others watched. "I want one," he said, nodding at the blade. Karuk didn't move. "Why?" "To cut faster, to hunt, to fight if needed." Karuk studied him. "You wanted to build or to take." Bato frowned. "Does it matter?" Karuk's voice was quiet but firm. "It matters more than anything." Word of the tool spread fast. Some admired it, others feared it. A few saw it as a symbol of power, no different than fire or food or strength. But Karuk felt the shift. The energy around the tribe was no longer simple. There were questions now, unspoken judgments, unrest. Nock stayed close, always watching, always learning. That night, as the fire cracked and danced in the dark, the boy asked, "Are you going to teach them?" Karuk didn't answer at first. He stared into the flames, the tool in his lap. His fingers traced its edge like tracing a memory. "I don't know," he said at last. "Not all minds are ready for sharp things." The next morning he made a choice. Karuk gathered the tribe. Under the great tree stump where it all began, he stood before them, not as a warrior, not as a hunter, but as something else, something new. He held up the tool. "This blade," he began, "was not made for war. It was made for work, for survival, for shelter. But I've seen the way some of you look at it, like it's a weapon, like it's a crown." He looked directly at Bato. "If you use it to destroy what we've built, then you are no better than..." The wind that breaks trees for no reason. A hush fell over the group. No one spoke. Some shifted uncomfortably. But others, especially the older ones, nodded slowly. Then Karuk did something unexpected. He set the blade on the ground. "I will teach," he said. "But not just how to make it. I will teach why we make it." He looked at every face. One by one. This tool is not just stone. It is choice. Later that day, under Karuk's guidance, Nock shaped his first edge. The boy's hands were clumsy, but his eyes were steady. When he finally finished, he held it like a gift, not a weapon. Karuk smiled. "Now," he said, "use it to build something." And Nock did. The days that followed were quiet, too quiet. Karuk had expected questions, even resistance, but instead the tribe seemed to accept his rules. Those who came to him asking about the tool learned not just how to carve the stone, but how to respect it. They sat in circles around the fire as he spoke, not just of technique, but of meaning. "It's not a weapon," he would say again and again. "It's a bridge between survival and something greater." And for a while, they believed him, but not Bato. Bato never wanted a lesson, he wanted control. While others carved wood or built shelters, Bato practiced in secret. His blade, made hastily and recklessly, was heavier than Karuk's. Cruder, but sharper in all the wrong ways, and when he swung it, he smiled, not because of what it could build, but because of what it could break. It happened one late afternoon. A hunter named Eru returned early from the forest, empty-handed, limping slightly from a twisted ankle. As he passed by the river, he found Bato crouched low, sharpening his tool with a jagged stone. "What are you doing?" Eru asked, half joking. Bato didn't look up. "Preparing!" "For what?" "Karuk said we only—" "Karuk doesn't speak for me!" Bato snapped, standing. "He thinks he owns stone now? That he owns the future? Let's see what happens when someone else holds the sharpest blade." Eru stepped back. "I'm warning you," he said, his voice low, tense. But Bato was already too far gone. He raised his blade, not to kill, but to prove something. A slash across Eru's arm, not deep, but enough. Enough to draw blood, enough to draw fear. Eru stumbled away, clutching his wound, and ran straight for Karuk. Karuk was sitting by the fire, Nock at his side, when Eru burst through the clearing. "Bato!" Eru gasped. "He's using the blade, not for wood, not for shelter, for—" Karuk stood instantly. He didn't need to hear the rest. He had feared this moment from the beginning. The tool had left his hands, but not his responsibility. He found Bato, sharpening the blade again beneath a tree, crouched like a predator. There was no shame in his eyes, only pride. "You made this possible," Bato said, almost smiling. "You showed us what could be done. Now you want to take it back?" "I showed you how to build," Karuk replied, voice shaking with fury. "Not how to threaten, not how to scar your own people." Bato shrugged. "Power is power. If they listen to you, they'll fear me." Karuk stepped closer, unarmed, but unflinching. "You think the blade gives you strength?" he said. "But it only gives you noise. Real strength is knowing when not to use it." Bato raised his tool again. Karuk didn't move. "I could cut you down," Bato hissed. "Then do it," Karuk whispered. "But you'll still be weak." Bato hesitated, just long enough. Others from the tribe appeared. Harma, Nock, Eru, now bandaged, all watching. Bato saw it then. He wasn't leading. He was losing. He threw the blade to the dirt and stormed off into the trees. Not a word. Just silence. That night, Karuk didn't celebrate. He sat alone, sharpening stones. Not for tools, but for understanding. The pain in his chest was heavier than any wound. Nock sat beside him, finally asking the question they'd both been holding. "Did you make a mistake?" Karuk didn't answer at first. Then, "Only if I stop now." The next morning, the tribe was different, not broken, but changed. Children no longer ran as freely. Conversations were whispered, glances more cautious. The blade had done more than cut Eru's skin. It had cut into the trust of the community. What once felt like the beginning of a new age now hovered in uncertainty. But Karuk refused to let fear be the final word. He gathered the tribe. Not in the open field where tools had been tested, but around the fire, where stories were told. Where wisdom had always lived, the old, the young, the wounded. Even those who doubted him, and for the first time Karuk didn't bring a blade. He brought a question. "What do we pass down?" he asked quietly. The fire cracked softly in the yai. Silence. "Is it meat? Fire? Shelter? No, these are things we use, but what we pass down is how we think. What we believe." He stood slowly and pointed to the sky. "A bird builds a nest. It teaches the next how to fly, but we teach meaning. And if we teach the blade, without teaching why, then we've taught nothing." Harma nodded solemnly. Nock watched, every word like it was water after a drought. Karuk stepped closer to the fire and dropped a sharpened stone into the flames. It hissed, cracked. Everyone leaned in. "You can throw a blade into the fire," Karuk said, "but fire doesn't shape stone. It takes hands, it takes intention." He paused, then looked around the circle. "So from this day on, no one learns to shape the blade. Unless they also learn to shape their heart." And with that, Karuk began something he had never done before. He started a school, not with walls, not with scrolls, but with questions. He took Nock as his first apprentice. Then two others, Laru, a girl who could climb trees faster than any boy, and Temu, a quiet thinker who asked questions no one else dared to voice. Together, they didn't just make tools. They talked about why to use them, when not to use them, and what it meant to leave a mark, not on trees, but on people. Over time, the whispers in the tribe changed. No longer fear, but curiosity. Children came to watch the apprentices. Elders sat nearby, nodding as Karuk explained why a dull blade could still be dangerous. Because it made men strike harder, not smarter. It wasn't just about cutting wood anymore. It was about carving a future. One evening, Nock turned to Karuk by the fire. "Do you think Bato will come back?" he asked, the question hanging like smoke. Karuk looked into the flames. "If he does, I hope he's ready to listen." That same night, Karuk watched LaRue carve a blade perfectly balanced for grip. Intemu was refining a double-edged tool for stripping bark. Nock was helping a younger child understand how to grind the stone safely, and in that moment, Karuk felt something shift, not in stone, but in time. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were learning, evolving, passing something deeper than tools, wisdom. The trees had begun to change. Their leaves, once green and full, were tinged now with red and gold. Autumn had come to the forest, and with it, a new stillness. The wind no longer whispered, it waited. Karuk felt it. So did the tribe. The apprentices had grown more confident. Nock now led lessons of his own. LaRue crafted a multi-purpose blade. Temu wrote, primitive symbols on cave walls, mapping the steps of stonework and thought. They were building more than shelter now. They were building memory. But not all memories stay quiet. It was Nock who saw him first. A shadow at the tree line, a figure watching, shoulders squared, movement slow but not cautious, calculated. "Karuk," Nock whispered. "He's back." Karuk didn't need to ask who. He stood, calmly, and faced the woods. As if he'd been expecting this moment all along, Beto stepped forward. He was thinner now, dirtied from life outside the tribe. His eyes, once filled with fire, were now colder, sharper, like a blade that had been honed, but not for building. "Heard you started teaching," Bato said, voice rough like cracked stone. "Started playing wise man." Karuk said nothing. He waited. Bato continued. "Did they tell you how they whispered my name like a curse after I left?" "You took everything from me." Karuk finally answered. "I didn't take anything. You threw it away." Beto's jaw tightened. He tossed something at Karuk's feet. A blade, his old one, now worn, chipped, stained, dark. "I made a better one," he said, smirking. "Faster, deadlier." Karuk didn't pick it up. He only looked at it for a moment, then at the children now watching from the distance. "What you carry," Karuk said slowly, "cuts deeper than wood. It carves who you become." Beto laughed, bitter and loud. "You think your stories and your rules will protect them. Out there," he pointed toward the hills, "the strong take what they want. No one teaches, no one listens. They just survive." "And yet," Karuk said softly, "you came back." Silence. For a moment it wasn't anger behind Bato's eyes. It was something older, sadder. A hunger not for food or power, but for belonging, and still his fists clenched around his new blade. Karuk stepped closer, within arm's reach. No weapon in hand, only his words. "If you came to fight, then fight," he said. "But know this, every cut you make in hate will echo longer than your name, and you will leave nothing behind but pain." Bato's arm twitched. Just once. Then, dropped, he turned and walked away. Not with shame, but not with victory either. Just silence. Later that night, Karuk sat alone, the chipped blade still lying where Bato had thrown it. Nock approached slowly. "You didn't stop him." "The boy," said Karuk, nodded. "He stopped himself. That's worth more than any punishment I could give." "But what if he comes back again, with others, with more blades?" Karuk's gaze didn't flinch. "Then we will teach louder, and love deeper. Not because we're weak, but because they are." The seasons changed once more. The leaves fell in waves. Winds whispered through the trees like old songs, and Karuk, now greyer around the temples, slower in his step, sat beneath the same great stump where it had all begun. He had lived long enough to see what he once only dreamed. Children building homes from timber? Fires started not in panic, but with care. Blades held not in fear, but in purpose. His apprentices were no longer just students. They were teachers. Nock, now a man, taught carving techniques to those barely old enough to walk. Laru led the women, of the tribe in building the most intricate shelter they'd ever known, curved roofs, smooth walls, shaped beams. Beauty is structure, she always said. Temu had created symbols, markings that turned stories into memory, instructions into knowledge. He painted them onto rock walls, making Karuk's lessons permanent. And Karuk? He watched, not with pride, but with peace. One night, as fire danced high and voices rose in song, Karuk called the apprentices to the center of the village. He held up a stone. Not sharp, not lashed to a handle, just raw. "This is where it started," he said, softly. A rock, a hand, and a need to survive. He placed it down, then held up another, refined, clean, polished to a near-glass edge. "And this is where we are now. But this," he pointed to the people, "you is what matters most, because tools don't remember. People do." There were no cheers, only silence. The good kind, the kind that fills the soul and doesn't need noise. Karuk sat beside the fire, arms resting gently across his knees. He no longer had to strike trees or shape stone. His body had scars, but his spirit felt light, say. The flames crackled. Nock sat beside him. "You knew this would happen," Nock said. Karuk smiled. "No, I only hoped." Days later, the apprentices unveiled something Karuk had not asked for. Near the clearing where he'd first felled a tree, they raised a monument, 3 standing stones, each carved with the symbols Temu had made. Between them sat a shaped platform of bark and stone, etched with a single message. Strength is in the hand, but legacy is in the heart. Karuk ran his hand across the words. He didn't cry, but his eyes carried a softness not born of sadness, just deep, full feeling. That night, under a sky filled with stars older than any tool, Karuk told one final story by the fire, not of stone, not of survival, but of listening. "To the wind," he said, "that tells you where to build. To the earth, that shows you what to shape. To your own breath, because it reminds you that you are still alive." And when the fire burned low, he handed Nock his first tool, the same one he had once bled with. "It still works," Karuk whispered. "But now, Kianus, it's yours." To every viewer reading this story, ask yourself, what are you shaping today? Not just with your hands, but with your choices, because the tools we leave behind will rust. But the meaning we carve into others, that's what lasts. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that dig deeper than words and strike closer to the heart. Until next time, build wisely, live boldly,